You're all an individual spider, and the more you can work together on creating this web of activities, you can tie up that lion. See, yeah? In your documentation, you find a case. Excuse me. Which initially was written, it's in your documentation, which initially was written for the case with the WTO. It's called the model of the pincer. You know what a pinch is, no? It's this little tool. If you have a wood chip in your hand, you can take it out, huh? The little, that's a pince. In French, pince. Pincette. That's actually what you're trying to achieve with your network. Looking for your strategic partners and creating that web. You are trying to force your political targets to make that decision. Huh? You're planning for it. You don't hope for it. A miracle is not going to happen unless you make it happen. Huh? And about networks, we can think much more in depth than a lot of agencies do, a lot of NGOs do. Because if you see happening in society that through all the efforts that you've done, petitions, position papers, lobbying, meetings, following a timeline, being there, inserting information, and still nothing happens because your government or the decision makers are not willing or have different interests, you still don't necessarily need to revert to roadblocks and throwing bricks. There's another way you can go about it. If you look at this, regional unions, European Union, worldwide institutions, Europe, other international institutions, this would be you, national partner NGOs. National government recipient country, they have so far been inactive by not deciding for your issue, and it's frustrating. So what can you do? If you look at this, what can you do? International funding NGOs, so I've reworded a little bit what was in the documentation, because that case was particularly provided, or particularly illustrated the a real South, what is it, NGOs from developing countries, and I don't consider the Balkans any developing country, right? You're at a different level. So I've really tried to make it very neutral. National partner NGOs and your national government recipient country. Other donor countries, other bilateral donor countries may help you in reinforcing the agenda towards that particular government. And they can either do that directly in their bilateral ties. There's no arrow here directly, but they can do that in the forum of the European Union when trade relations, when other interests are being discussed, so you can take that along. The European Union is one entity of ministers of foreign affairs, perhaps, or of ministers of agriculture, or in your particular sector there, and in health there are ministers of health that meet in the context of the European Union that discuss on European health issues, right? If some way or the other you're able to reach out there through other donor agencies, through perhaps a European Commission, or through another international initiative or agreement that you're attached to, you can try another way to have your national government be influenced by others. Let me give you an example on the environment. I put EC Brussels, I put it here, the European Commission, because the Union and the Commission are not the same, as you know. Huh? European Parliament. All the constituents in the European Parliament, all the European countries have very strict environmental regulations. Right? The European Commission, therefore, as a type of a donor agency, is therefore also under a lot of pressure to invest in environmental management. Netherlands Development Corporation, in this case I take the case of the Netherlands, environmental management is a very high priority because we consider that very important in Holland, and will try to influence European Parliament and the EC Brussels to force the rest of Europe to also abide, because we receive all the water in Holland, and we think it's very important that that water is clean and not polluted, for example. So if you're in a water lobby, these people in Holland can perfectly outline for you the importance of water. I have also added private sector. Can be in the Netherlands, can be at the European level. If you're able to get in touch with private sector entities that promote environmental solar panels or windmills, what else have you, they can be a powerful influence on the environment lobby, because they bring employment, they bring in money, they bring in economic transactions. Here we have some international funding NGOs on the environment. Put here Greenpeace. We have Aid Environment. That's a small technical NGO. But these are NGOs that here, for example, in the environment lobby here, if they start working with Dutch NGOs, it will reinforce your partnership, your network, and together you're able to create that spider web. I put here Europe Aid, which is a particular aid institution that can assist there. Worldwide. Now what would worldwide be? Worldwide in environment lobby. International institutions. What's the difference between international institutions and worldwide? With worldwide I mean there are international agreements, worldwide agreements, multilateral environment agreements. There's a UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. CITES is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. CBD is the Convention on Biological Diversity. These are international agreements that a lot of countries have signed up to conduct accordingly. And if you, as your NGO, if you want to strengthen the national partner movement in the environment, and you can move your government to become a member of any of these international conventions, you win your case. International institutions, I put here, for example, UNEP, the UN Environment Programme, UNDP, the Development Programme, the World Bank, other institutions. Unions, I put here the Arab Union because I have worked on that myself when I was working in Amman. Ministry of Environment in Iraq. I was working for the Iraq program. Research institutes I have here, university. They can be either national or international research institutes. In Afghanistan there were a lot of refugees related to drought. just about a third of the refugees, they had to move because they could no longer access water. The groundwater levels had been depleted and the rivers had dried up, so they couldn't grow any crops anymore, had to move, creating instability in the country. On top, they had an issue with the Taliban, and there was a conflictuous situation. For Iraq, we stepped in the area of the United States and the other allied forces that were using depleted uranium in their weapons. And that was the topic. Let me put this here, because that was the lobby that we were trying to have on depleted uranium, the use of it. Is it, even if there's war, is it ethic to use depleted uranium in a war situation? It's an extremely difficult question. The fact was that it was used, and then what happens is it's used as a penetrator, depleted uranium. If you use these rounds of artillery with depleted uranium, they can penetrate a building, they can go through a wall, and then inside in the building the device explodes. So that actually everything inside explodes except the structure. The structure stands. It's very targeted, a very targeted way of using ammunition. But then what happens is when it explodes, the depleted uranium comes free. It's a heavy metal and actually settles very close. It doesn't blow away. It's not very light, so it settles very close to that area. But that area is then lightly radioactive, contaminated. Depending on the quality of the soil, it either can trickle down in the groundwater and then consumed by people, or if it's not, if it's concrete, then actually there's nothing the matter. It can just be cleaned up then because it settles there. But it has to be done really quickly, because otherwise people move in, and with movement of people, the material spreads. So that was the issue. Scary as it seems, the lobby was then, we need research on the impact of this depleted uranium. Does it impact on the health of people? And that was the only thing that we, as working for UNEP, that was the only thing that we wanted to do. Even if you're in a UN organization, you need your lobby. It's not that you as NGOs are the only ones fighting for good causes. Everybody is trying. But everybody does so from a different perspective. We worked very closely with some national NGOs to get the data from the ground, the primary beneficiary consultation. You have to be careful with the information, and particularly the information that was coming from the media, because they would show awful pictures of babies with misformed heads, and immediately the conclusion was there that because of depleted uranium, these babies were misformed. But that conclusion was not substantiated. We don't know. It could be, but it could also be something else, right? We don't know. So that needs to be verified. For that, we contracted agencies like Aid Environment, Greenpeace. We engaged research institutes, private sector research institutes, so not directly the business, but also university. We were talking to the European Commission. I personally worked with the Ministry of Development Cooperation